Could you trust the one you love after a gut-wrenching secret tears your life apart? Jake thought he knew his wife, until a chilling discovery exposed her hidden truth. Deceptions unravel. Lies pile up. A scandalous twist threatens everything he built. Will he crumble or fight back? The truth is darker than you think. But what happens next will blow your mind. Jake Miller, 38, was a mechanic in Portland, Oregon, with a gift for breathing life into old motorcycles. His days were spent in his garage, surrounded by the sharp scent of oil and the low hum of engines, or in the house he'd bought for his wife, Sarah. They'd married at 20, brimming with dreams. She wanted to design stunning interiors. He wanted to build machines from nothing. 18 years later, their marriage was a war zone. Sarah chased a flawless life, one that could shine on social media. Jake craved simpler things: black coffee at dawn, classic rock on his radio, and long rides on his bike through the misty Oregon hills. He'd spent years trying to make her happy, but each compromise carved away a piece of himself. He felt like a stranger in his own life, unable to trace when he'd started fading. Sarah's demands were relentless. She critiqued his every choice, how he spoke to her friends, what he prioritized at work, even how he spent his rare free hours. Jake used to push back, hoping to mend things, to rediscover the spark they'd had as kids. But over time, he stopped fighting. It was easier to nod, swallow his frustration, and retreat to his garage. That space was his alone, a refuge where he could think without her voice in his head. The house, once their shared dream, felt like her territory now. Jake paid the mortgage, fixed the leaks, mowed the lawn, but emotionally, it belonged to Sarah. He'd catch himself staring at his tools, wondering when he'd traded his fire for silence. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. Her world revolved around her image, her projects, her curated life. Their evenings had a grim routine. Jake would come home, hands stained from the garage, and find Sarah on the couch, scrolling her phone or typing furiously. He'd try to talk, ask about her day, but her responses were curt, her eyes fixed on the screen. One night, he walked in, and she didn't even glance up. "How's it going?" he asked, pouring coffee from the pot. She shrugged, fingers tapping. Jake sat across from her, the silence heavy, waiting for a flicker of the connection they used to have. Nothing came. He sipped his coffee, the bitterness mirroring his thoughts. It wasn't just a bad day or a rough patch. It was a chasm, one they'd both ignored for years, and it was swallowing them whole. Jake started spending more time in the garage, not just to work, but to escape. He'd tinker with a rusted Harley, each turn of the wrench away to clear his mind. The bike was honest. Every bolt, every gear had a purpose. It didn't judge him or demand he be someone else. One evening, as he tightened the chain, he caught himself humming an old Zeppelin tune. It startled him. He hadn't felt that kind of ease in months, maybe years. The realization hit hard. He was happiest when Sarah wasn't around. It wasn't anger or betrayal yet, just a quiet truth. He loved his work, his bike, his small moments of peace. But living for her approval was killing that joy. He couldn't keep doing it. The change wasn't dramatic. Jake didn't yell or walk out. He just stopped trying to please her. He'd make his own meals, ignoring her pointed sighs when he didn't offer to share. He'd skip her complaints about his late hours or his obsession with the garage. Instead of arguing, he'd nod, say "got it," and walk away. Sarah noticed, and it rattled her. She was used to his apologies, his efforts to smooth things over. Now he was different, calm, detached, untouchable. Her usual tactics, sharp comments, subtle guilt trips, bounced off him. One night, she snapped, "You're barely here anymore, Jake. What's your deal?" He looked at her, steady. "I'm just doing my thing," he said, and headed to the garage. Her silence followed him, louder than any fight. That moment in the garage felt like a turning point. Jake leaned against his workbench, the Harley half-assembled beside him. He didn't need to win an argument or prove a point. He just needed to reclaim himself. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of control, not over Sarah, but over his own life. It was fragile, but it was his. He started small, skipping her endless critiques, focusing on his work, riding his bike more often. Each choice was a brick in a wall he was building, one that shielded him from her expectations. Sarah's frustration grew, but Jake didn't care. He wasn't fighting her. He was fighting for himself, and that was enough for now. Sarah's behavior took a sharp turn in the weeks that followed. She began staying out late, offering flimsy excuses about client meetings or urgent work projects. Her answers were clipped, evasive, and her phone was always locked, its screen angled away from Jake's view. He noticed the change, but held off on confronting her. His gut told him she was hiding something significant, and he wasn't about to let her control the situation without a fight. One evening, while logging into their shared bank account to cover a utility bill, he stopped cold. The screen listed transactions he didn't recognize, hundreds of dollars spent on upscale restaurants, weekend getaways, and boutique purchases Sarah never mentioned. His stomach churned. This wasn't just her pulling away. Sarah was living a separate life, one she deliberately kept from him. He took screenshots of every suspicious charge, his hand steady but his mind racing. He didn't know how he'd use the evidence, but he knew he needed it. Her accusations grew more pointed. One night, as Jake sat at the kitchen table, nursing a coffee after a long day at the garage, she tore into him. "You're completely checked out, Jake," she said, her voice dripping with blame. "You don't care about us, do you? You just given up." He met her gaze, seeing the tactic for what it was. She was flipping the narrative, painting him as the problem to cover her own tracks. It was a move he'd fallen for in the past, apologizing to keep the peace. "Not this time. Maybe I'm just tired of fighting for nothing," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. Sarah's eyes flashed with irritation, her lips parting as if to fire back, but no words came. She grabbed her phone, stormed out of the kitchen, and left a heavy silence in her wake. Jake stayed put, sipping his coffee, piecing together the puzzle. She wasn't just creating distance. She was hiding something big. The next blow landed unexpectedly. A mutual friend, Mike, caught Jake at a local dive bar after work. "I hate to get in the middle of this, man," Mike said, shifting uncomfortably on his stool. "But Sarah's been talking to people. She's telling everyone you're the one wrecking the marriage, that you've abandoned her emotionally." Jake's jaw tightened, a slow burn of anger rising in his chest. Sarah wasn't just concealing her actions. She was crafting a story to make him the villain, turning their shared circle against him while she slipped further into her secret life. He thanked Mike, kept his cool, but inside he was livid. She was trying to control the narrative, to rewrite their reality, so she could come out clean. He wouldn't let her twist the truth. That night, he vowed to stay one step ahead, to protect himself from whatever she was planning. Jake turned methodical, almost surgical. He began documenting everything. Texts where Sarah dodged his questions about her whereabouts, timestamps of her late-night returns, detailed records of her unexplained expenses. He wasn't driven by vengeance. He was done being played for a fool. At the garage, he confided in Tom, a weathered biker who'd been through a brutal divorce years earlier. "She's setting you up, brother," Tom said, tossing a wrench onto the workbench with a clang. "Get your shit together. Lawyers, evidence, all of it. Protect what's yours before she pulls the rug out." Jake nodded, the advice cutting through his fog of frustration. He wasn't fighting to save Sarah or their marriage anymore. He was fighting for his own future, for the life he wanted to rebuild. That evening, he spent hours researching family lawyers, landing on one with a reputation for handling messy cases with precision. He booked a consultation, a mix of dread and determination settling in his gut. Sarah's tactics became more erratic, swinging wildly between extremes. Some days, she was cold, barely acknowledging Jake's presence, her silence a weapon to keep him on edge. Other days, she'd pivot to calculated warmth, testing his resolve. One morning, she made breakfast, pancakes his favorite, stacked high with butter and syrup, and sat across from him, smiling like they were back in their early days. "We're good, right, Jake?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pleading, her hand brushing his arm. Jake saw through the act. She wasn't trying to fix their marriage. She was trying to keep him off balance, to pull him back into her orbit before he could act. "I'm fine," he said, his voice flat, grabbing his keys and heading for the door. Her smile faltered, a flicker of panic crossing her face, but he didn't look back. Each time he sidestepped her manipulations, he felt a surge of strength, a piece of himself clicking back into place. He wasn't falling for her games anymore, and she was starting to realize it. The tension at home was suffocating, but Jake stayed focused. He kept up his routine, working at the garage, riding his bike along the winding roads outside Portland, clearing his head with every mile. One evening, alone in the garage, he found an old photo tucked inside a toolbox. Him and Sarah, 20 years old, laughing at some long-forgotten joke on a beach. The image hit him hard, a sharp pang of what they'd lost, but also clarified his path. That version of them was gone, buried under years of resentment and unspoken truths. He couldn't keep chasing a memory. He slipped the photo back into the box, his fingers lingering for a moment, then turned to his Harley, its frame gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The bike was nearly finished, a symbol of the work he was doing on himself. Sarah was planning something. He could feel it in her hurried glances, her guarded tone. But Jake was ready, whatever she threw at him next. He wasn't the same man she could push around. He was building something new, something she couldn't touch, and he'd fight to keep it. Sarah's secret life unraveled faster than Jake expected. Her late nights grew more frequent, her excuses thinner. She'd mumble about work and rush out, leaving Jake with a sinking feeling. He kept collecting evidence, texts, bank records, timestamps, building a case he hoped he'd never need. But Sarah wasn't just hiding. She was striking back. One evening, she cornered him in the kitchen. "You're destroying us, Jake," she said, voice trembling with rehearsed hurt. "Everyone sees it. You've given up." He stayed calm, but her words cut deep. She was framing him as the failure, twisting their story to shield herself. Jake didn't argue. "If that's what you think," he said, walking away. Her silence burned, but he felt stronger for not taking the bait. The betrayal deepened when Jake got a call from their neighbor, Lisa. "I heard Sarah talking at a coffee shop," Lisa said, hesitant. "She's telling people you're distant, that you've pushed her away. Some believe her." Jake's anger flared. Sarah wasn't just lying to him. She was poisoning their community, painting him as the villain to justify her actions. He thanked Lisa, his mind racing. This wasn't about saving face, it was about survival. Sarah was trying to isolate him, to make sure her narrative won before he could act. He doubled down, saving every scrap of proof, from her vague text to a receipt for a trip she claimed was canceled. At the garage, Jake confided more in Tom. "She's not just hiding stuff," Jake said, tightening a bolt on his Harley. "She's setting me up to take the fall." Tom nodded, wiping grease from his hands. "Seen it before, man. She's scared you're onto her. Get a lawyer now, not later." Jake had already booked a consultation, but Tom's words lit a fire. He met with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen, who listened to his story and reviewed his evidence. "You're smart to document this," Karen said. "She's building a case against you, but we'll build a better one." Jake left her office feeling grounded, like he'd finally taken control of the chaos. Sarah's manipulations grew bolder. She started leaving voicemails for Jake, tearful pleas about fixing things, only to pivot to cold accusations hours later. One night, she waited for him in the living room, eyes red, holding a photo from their wedding. "Don't you miss this?" she asked, voice soft. Jake saw the trap. She wasn't grieving their past. She was testing his loyalty, trying to pull him back before he slipped away. "That's gone, Sarah," he said, heading to the garage. Her face hardened, but he didn't care. Each dodge made him feel sharper, more alive. He wasn't her pawn anymore. Jake leaned into his own life. He joined a local biker group, finding camaraderie with guys who valued his skills, not his apologies. One night, at a bar with the crew, Tom raised a glass. "To Jake, who's finally waking up," he said, grinning. The group laughed, and Jake felt a warmth he'd missed for years. He started therapy too, meeting a counselor named Mark who helped him unpack the years he'd spent shrinking for Sarah. "You've been carrying her weight," Mark said. "What do you want for you?" The question hit hard. Jake didn't have an answer yet, but he wanted to find it. He kept working on his Harley, each repair a step toward clarity. Sarah's next move was a low blow. Jake got an email from their bank, flagging suspicious activity on their joint account. Someone had tried to transfer a chunk of their savings, his savings, mostly to an unknown account. He called the bank, confirmed it wasn't him, and froze the transaction. The timing was no coincidence. Sarah was escalating, trying to hit him where it hurt. Jake shared the email with Karen, who wasn't surprised. "She's getting desperate," Karen said. "Stay calm. Keep recording. We'll use this." Jake felt a mix of rage and relief. Sarah was slipping, and he was ready to catch her mistakes. The tension at home was a tightrope. Jake kept his routine: work, rides, therapy, while Sarah's mood swung unpredictably. One evening, he found her in the kitchen, scrolling her phone, oblivious to him. He didn't ask about her day. He didn't need to. The Harley in the garage, nearly complete, was his focus now. It wasn't just a bike. It was proof he could rebuild something broken, including himself. Sarah's lies were piling up, her grip on him weakening. Jake knew the truth was close to breaking free. He wasn't sure what she'd try next, but he was prepared. He'd face it head-on, not as the man she'd shaped, but as the one he was becoming. Jake's resolve hardened as Sarah's deception unraveled. He was done being her target. With evidence stacked, texts, bank records, timestamps, he met his lawyer, Karen, to plan his next steps. "We'll push for mediation," Karen said, reviewing his files. "It's cleaner than a trial, and your documentation gives us leverage." Jake nodded, trusting her strategy. He wanted this over, not out of spite, but to reclaim his life. Karen warned him Sarah might try to twist the narrative further, but Jake was ready. He'd spent too long bending to her will. Now he'd stand firm. Sarah's tactics grew frantic. She'd alternate between tearful apologies and sharp accusations, testing his limits. One morning, she blocked his path to the garage, eyes pleading. "We can still fix this, Jake," she said, voice breaking. "Don't throw us away." He saw the manipulation, her attempt to derail him. "You threw us away," he said, stepping past her. Her face crumpled, but he kept moving. Each time he shut down her ploys, he felt lighter, stronger. The garage became his anchor, where he'd work on his Harley, its gleaming frame a mirror of his own rebuilding. Jake leaned into his new routine. He threw himself into the biker group, finding solace in their easy camaraderie. One evening, they rode out to the Columbia River, the wind cutting through his thoughts. Tom, the group's unofficial leader, pulled him aside. "You're looking solemn, man," Tom said, clapping his shoulder. "Whatever she's pulling, you're bigger than it." Jake grinned, the words sinking in. He wasn't just surviving, he was growing. At therapy, Mark pushed him to define his future. "What's Jake Miller want?" Mark asked. Jake thought of his bike, the open road, a life without constant judgment. "Freedom," he said, the word feeling real for the first time. A chance encounter added fuel to his fire. At a Portland coffee shop, Jake met Kate, a librarian with a sharp wit and a love for old detective novels. They talked for an hour: books, music, the way people lose themselves in others. She didn't pry, but her question stuck with him. "What's holding you back from being you?" It wasn't flirtation, just clarity. Kate's words echoed Mark's, pushing Jake to see how much he'd buried for Sarah. He left the shop energized, determined to finish what he'd started. That night, he poured his focus into the Harley, tightening its final bolts. It was ready to ride, and so was he. Sarah's desperation peaked. Jake got a call from their bank, another attempt to move money from their joint account, this time caught by their fraud team. He forwarded the alert to Karen, who added it to their case. "She's sloppy now," Karen said. "This helps us." Jake's anger flared, but he channeled it. He met with a mediator, a neutral woman named Ellen, who laid out the process. Jake presented his evidence calmly, detailing Sarah's spending and lies without venom. Sarah, in contrast, was erratic, blaming Jake for abandoning her. Ellen stayed impartial, but Jake could tell his clarity was cutting through. He wasn't fighting to hurt Sarah. He was fighting for fairness. The biker group became his lifeline. One night, they gathered at a dive bar, swapping stories over cheap beer. Tom raised a glass. To Jake, who's kicking ass and taking names, he said, laughing. The group cheered, and Jake felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. He started mentoring a younger biker, Sam, teaching him how to rebuild an engine. It wasn't just about mechanics. It was about passing on resilience. Therapy kept him grounded too. Mark helped him see he'd been living for Sarah's approval, not his own. "You're not that guy anymore," Mark said. Jake agreed. He was building a life that fit him, not her. Sarah tried one last play. She left a voicemail, sobbing, claiming she'd made mistakes but wanted to start over. Jake listened, then deleted it. Her tears didn't move him anymore. They were just noise. He met with Ellen again, where Sarah's story began to crack. She couldn't explain the bank activity or her lies to their friends. Jake stayed composed, letting the truth speak. He didn't need to attack her. She was undoing herself. Back at the garage, he took the Harley for a test ride, its roar filling the night. It wasn't just a bike. It was proof he could rebuild anything, even himself. Sarah's grip was slipping, and Jake was ready for the endgame. The mediation reached its climax, and Jake was ready. He met with Ellen, the mediator, armed with his evidence, texts, bank records, proof of Sarah's lies. Karen, his lawyer, had prepped him to stay calm, to let the facts speak. Sarah sat across the table, her face a mix of defiance and nerves. She tried to spin her story, claiming Jake had abandoned her, that his distance forced her to find her own way. But her voice wavered as Ellen pressed for details. Jake laid out his case methodically. The secret spending, the attempts to move their savings, the lies she'd spread to their friends. He didn't raise his voice or lash out. He didn't need to. The truth was enough, and Sarah's excuses crumbled under its weight. Ellen's neutral expression softened slightly, her notes piling up. Jake felt a quiet surge of confidence. He was winning, not through anger, but through clarity. Sarah's final plea came mid-session. She leaned forward, eyes glistening, and turned to Jake. "I messed up," she said, voice breaking. "I was lost, but we can still fix this. Don't end us like this." It was a performance, one Jake had seen before. He looked at her, unflinching. "You ended us, Sarah," he said, steady. "I'm just closing the door." Her face fell, the mask slipping. Ellen moved on, outlining terms. Jake pushed for the house. He paid for it, maintained it, poured his life into it. Sarah fought back, claiming she deserved half, but her arguments were weak, tangled in contradictions. By the end, Ellen proposed a split. Jake kept the house. Sarah got a fair share of their savings. Jake agreed, relieved. It wasn't about greed. It was about holding on to what was his. The fallout hit Sarah hard. Word spread among their circle, not through Jake, but through the cracks in her own story. Friends like Mike and Lisa, who'd heard her version, started asking questions she couldn't answer. Jake didn't fuel the gossip. He didn't need to. He was done with her games, done with the drama. Sarah sent him a text a week later, a long apology about her mistakes and how she'd lost herself. Jake read it, then deleted it. Her words didn't carry weight anymore. He wasn't angry, just free. That freedom felt like air after years underwater, sharp and clean. He didn't wish her ill. He just didn't wish for her at all. Jake moved forward with purpose. He sold the house. It held too many ghosts, and bought a smaller place near the Columbia River, with a garage big enough for his dreams. He turned it into a workshop where he restored bikes and taught others. Sam, the young biker he'd mentored, became his first regular, soaking up Jake's lessons on engines and grit. "You're like a damn professor," Sam said, grinning as they rebuilt a carburetor. Jake laughed, the sound easy real. The biker group remained his anchor. One night, they rode out to a bluff overlooking the river, the stars sharp above. Tom handed Jake a beer. "You made it, man," he said. "Not many do." Jake clinked bottles, feeling the weight of the words. He'd fought for this, and he'd won. Therapy kept him steady. Mark, his counselor, helped him unpack the years he'd spent shrinking for Sarah. "You're not defined by her," Mark said in one session. "You're defining yourself now." Jake nodded, the truth settling deep. He started riding his Harley more, its roar a reminder of who he was. One evening, he stopped at the coffee shop where he'd met Kate. She was there, reading a new novel. They talked again, music life, the roads they'd traveled. "You seem lighter," she said, smiling. "I am," Jake replied, meaning it. It wasn't romance, just connection, the kind he'd forgotten was possible. He left with a grin, the night air crisp against his skin. Jake's workshop became a hub. He took on more projects, mentoring kids like Sam who needed direction. The biker group spread the word, and soon Jake had clients from across Portland. He didn't chase fame or wealth, just work that mattered. One day, as he tightened a bolt on a restored bike, Sam asked, "How'd you get through it, man? All that shit with your ex?" Jake paused, wiping his hands. "I stopped letting her decide who I was," he said. Sam nodded, like it was a lesson he'd carry too. Jake felt a quiet pride. He wasn't just rebuilding bikes. He was rebuilding lives, starting with his own. Months later, Jake rode his Harley along the river, the engines hum blending with the wind. He stopped at a lookout, the water glinting below. He thought of Sarah, not with bitterness, but with distance. She was a chapter, not his story. His story was the road ahead, the workshop, the people who saw him for him. He'd faced her lies, her betrayal, and come out whole. The bike beneath him, polished and strong, was proof of that. He revved the engine, ready for whatever came next, knowing he'd built something no one could take away.